mean, this picture shot the homeless guy. If I want to justify it a little bit, it's not making fun of him or like sort of making him vulnerable. It's more about me just using him as a prop in my photograph. And so maybe that's ethically dubious, but for me, it feels a little safer.
Welcome to this new episode of Eyeshot 50 millimeters, our interview series available on YouTube, and every episode comes out each and every Saturday. So make sure to follow us. We're right here with Blake Andrews, one of the most iconic, ironic, and unexpected voices also of street photography. With his images, he truly transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. So thank you, Blake, for being with us, and welcome to Eyeshot 50 millimeter.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the nice description.
Welcome, Blake. And I want to give a message to our followers to keep supporting street photography by subscribing, liking, and commenting, because what's just one small click to you means supporting independent publishing, independent street photography, and independent arts and craft made in Italy. Thank you for being with us, Blake.
All right. Thanks again.
So, Blake, we want to immediately start off with one of the most toughest questions we always ask, and is, who is Blake Andrews according to Blake Andrews?
Do you want a basic bio or just who I am today?
Oh, something that resonates with you, that you feel like it's descriptive of yourself?
I mean, well, you called me a street photographer, and I know I've been sort of put in that box, but it's a little bit uncomfortable for me. I don't really describe myself that way because I don't live in a big city. I don't shoot, typical street photography scenes. I don't usually go into big crowds and try and catch, decisive moment and things. I mean, I do that on occasion when the opportunity presents itself, but most of what I do is either in rural settings or in a small city or on down abandoned alleys, things like that, which are I guess street photography in a broad sense, but not as you would probably find it if you looked in the, on more traditional sites. So I should put a little disclaimer in there. Yeah. But anyway, I basically do street photography in the broad sense that I go out and I find photos basically as I encounter them in the world, and I don't plan anything. I just basically take walks with my camera and encounter whatever I see and try and transform the world into photographs. Usually it doesn't wind up being a good photo, but if you shoot enough and look enough, you gradually build up a collection of transformations that becomes an archive. And so some of that archive is going to be in this book, which is, I'll be curious to see. I can go out and take the photos and categorize them as I see them, but it's always fun to put them through someone else's lens and see how other people edit them and what they might think of them. So, you describe me as iconic and ironic, and I can't remember the other word, but...
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely unconventional in a way, if I may say that, if you can agree with that. I would think an unconventional way of doing photography.
Yeah, I appreciate the word unconventional. I think if a street photographer or if any photographer is doing their job, they sort of develop a distinctive view and speak in a visual voice that is sort of by definition unconventional, because each person sees in a certain way, and so by definition that's sort of non-convention. I mean, convention means like the generalized view. So that's a sort of a quick take. I mean, if you want just basic background, I grew up in California.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you more maybe when photography did actually enter your life. Was there a specific moment, a specific event that occurred in your life?
I mean, okay, so when I grew up, I grew up in sort of an artistic household. My mother was an artist and my father's a musician. And so I was always sort of encouraged to do creative activities and, but not photography. That was never really part of my life I never picked up a camera until I was about 25. I grew up with all sorts of creative influences, and we had like family scrapbooks, my typical photos in that sense. I had no, I was in a small rural place and there was no real outlet to take classes like that. There's no photo instruction, no darkroom, anything like that. I didn't encounter that until my mid-20s when I moved to Portland. And so that's when I took a photo class, and that was kind of the start of it all. Just on a whim, almost, I took a night class and basic introduction to film photography. This was back in the early '90s, so basically photography was film based, black and white
Yeah.
film, darkroom, negative processing, and all that stuff. And so I didn't think much of it at the time. I took this class, and then I sort of gradually fell further and further into the down the rabbit hole, I guess. And so started
Mm-mm.
taking pictures. Became more interested in pictures. I started seeing more of the possibilities of what pictures could be, especially the disconnect between what photographs might be and the original scene that they were drawn from, which is still something that sort of motivates me to this day. Is that the ability of a photograph to be separate from what you think it should be. So you look through your camera and at the world, and that should hopefully correlate to what's in the photograph. But the disconnect between that reality and the resulting image has always fascinated me. And I think in the beginning, especially, that was what sort of kept me
Going.
taking pictures and sort of pulled me in further and further. And then, probably typical photographer process, I just went further and further and took more pictures, started getting a few cameras, and it became more and more central to my life. And, one of the fun things about photography is that it can be a discipline in itself. It's sort of a central practice that you set aside and devote a lot of time to, but it can also just be adjacent to all the other activities that you're doing anyway. So you might
Yeah.
go to the grocery store or take a drive, or wherever you go, you can have a camera and make photography part of that. And so that's I'll go out sometimes to with the specific purpose of taking photographs, but a lot of times my favorite photos, they just happen because I'm through the course of life, I'm hanging out with my kids, or I'm out playing basketball or going on a hike or
Yeah.
something, and I just see something, and so it's sort of like a secondary function. But it all blends together. I mean, it's all sort of one big diaristic photo stream, at
Yeah.
least as I practice it.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And do
it
you
kind of,
remember the first photo you took?
you mean ever?
Yeah. One that made you feel like I want to do photography.
I mean, I do remember maybe not the very first photo I took, but I remember taking photos in this class that I mentioned. So that was probably like my first or second role. I took kind of the classic assignment of shoot an egg. That was one of our very first assignments. And so, I had no idea how to approach that, but I basically put an egg under this like strong light and made these weird forms. I definitely have a mental image of going through that practice and looking at the picture. I mean, it wasn't a good picture. It's not a
Mhm.
picture that I even have around today, but that's my first memory of taking a photo. And the first one that really grabbed me was probably in '96 or '95. I took a self portrait that was I can show it to you. It's in front of a bus that's sort of moving through the scene, and I'm standing still, and so it has this sort of
Yes.
confusing combination of images. I don't even remember taking, but when I saw it on the negative on the contact sheet, it sort of was like, "Whoa, what's going on there?" And it was just one of those, how photographs happen sometimes, where there's sort of things coming together and like a little bit of serendipity, and it creates something that would be almost hard to imagine. You couldn't even plan it, but it sort of came together in a way.
Yeah.
And that was in say '96. That was on a long backpacking trip.
I just want to continue on this introduction section with just one last question. And I wanted to ask you, our backgrounds, the way we grew up, the things we see, the things we don't see, in a way shape our lives as well. So I wanted to ask you, how did your upbringing, you've moved also to different cities as well, influence, if it did, your photographic vision?
Well, definitely. I mean, I already mentioned that I grew up in an environment sort of fostered creativity. So I always had this sort of impulse to make things. I also was like I've always been a pack rat. I've always been a collector, and sort of I used to collect baseball cards and magazines and stamps. And I even when I was like 6 years old, I was just always acquiring things. So I think that sort of feeds into my impulse today to take pictures. It sort of comes from the same motivation. I think photographers, they move through the world and they grab, and they can't let things go. They have to sort of move through and just as a pack rat. So there's those two things, and then the other thing about my thing the strain that I can trace back to childhood is exploration. I mean, I grew up in a rural area. I had a lot of free time as a kid, and this is back before sort of hyper scheduled childhoods, and kids had a lot more time to roam back then. And I would basically just spend my afternoons and after school and summers poking around town and poking around alleys and finding trails and just where I was always sort of off on some adventure, like seeking things. And it sort of feeds into what I do today with a camera. I didn't have a camera back then, but I have a camera now, and that's kind of the same thing. I'll go on a walk with no real plan of like where I'm going, and maybe like a left turn looks interesting, so I go down this way. And that, it's kind of the same thing I did when I was 8 years old, sort of just a curiosity about like what's out there, and a sort of a thirst for new content, basically. And so that, I can trace that back all the way back to childhood. So
Yeah, I would like to move a little bit into your visual language. So something about your creative approach and all related topics. And since you are mainly a black and white photographer, what does this language give you more than color? What does it have that color doesn't?
Well, I've always been attracted to black and white. I mean, back when I first started, that was basically the only thing available, and color was much harder to do. And so there may be part of it rooted in that. It was just, I got started down that road, and it felt natural to me. But it's always, I've tried a bunch of different cameras and color and effects and stuff, and I always circulate back to this black and white film and 35 millimeter approach that has always been pretty central. I mean, obviously, black and white, it's a more of an abstract language. It takes the world and it instantly puts it through a little filter and changes it into something else. And so I talked earlier about the disconnect, what the reality versus like how it translates to photographs. When you shoot a black and white picture, it just does that automatically. And I like to take that a little further usually. And so if you look at my pictures, there's like a lot of visual games and elements that sort of combine in confusing ways and ambiguous ways. And Lee Friedlander is probably my major influence, and he does, a lot of the same stuff. It's sort of like going out in the world, finding different elements and seeing like, oh, it's kind of a fun game. Like, how can I combine these into something that's a more of a formal composition? And so black and white, that's a lot of why I shoot black and white, is because it lends itself for me to that process. I mean, you can do the same thing in color. I know all sorts of photographers do all sorts of different things, but the fact that I started in black and white, and I've always had that sort of impulse to abstract and formalize, and sort of, I just want to like get away from what the original scene was. Most of my pictures, I don't care what was in the scene. I remember the date and the place, but as far as the subject matter and whatever I was shooting, it's kind of immaterial to what I care about is the photograph. I want the image,
And about that, you said in some interviews or in general, your materials, that when you shoot in black and white, you forget the scene, as you were saying earlier. You kind of just confirmed this statement. And do you want the viewer to do the same? What would you like to happen in the mind of the viewer?
I mean, I think ideally I'd like the photographs to be seen without any surrounding information. So just to see people, I'd like people to see the photograph and not know where or what or anything about the picture at first. And then maybe they can fill in some of that information later if they want to. So usually when I look at a picture by someone else, I just want to like get the raw visuals. And then, I always have sort of a question in my back of my mind. Okay, what's happening here? Where is it? How did this event occur? And so I guess that information is helpful, but sometimes it can get in the way of the photograph itself. So, like I said, the most important thing is the image, and I think if you can approach images in that way, that's really the best way initially. And then fill in all the other information is interesting too. Like a good example is like I think I sent you guys a picture of a football game. So it's like I'm at
Yeah.
a big stadium with all these people, and
Yeah,
I
the one
take
with
this picture of these people, and so it's more about just this little moment of these people, and then it's also you could look at it as like I'm documenting a sporting event. It was like this game and this game, and the Ducks won, blah 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 blah, and there was this many people at the event, and so if that picture was on like the newspaper on the sports page, it would have all that stuff. But for me, it's more about like just this thing, just the visuals.
Yeah.
Does that
And
answer your
speaking
question?
yeah, of course.
Okay.
Thank you, Blake. And since there's lots of curious elements, lots of elements that can spark curiosity in the viewer, as you said, one could describe your style as surreal. Do you agree with this definition? Is that something you look for?
I would take the word surreal as a compliment. I like that word a lot. I mean, I would like the surreal label more than street photographer. I think. I mean, they called Cartier-Bresson a surrealist. I think he was, he's a street photographer too. But anything that sort of pulls you, like I said before, pulls you out of reality and into some other place, which I think is basically what surrealism is. Taking reality and sort of twisting it in some way. So if I can do that with my pictures, I'll take that label. Sure, surrealism.
Okay. And since reality and manipulation of reality have such a high risk of turning out to have an imperfect shot, what do you think of imperfection in your type of photography? Do you think it can enrich your shots? Do you look for a little imperfection to add as sort of a signature? What's your relationship with imperfection?
Yeah. Not only do I think imperfection can help, I think it's almost mandatory in some way. I think pictures too often are too perfect. I mean, most of what I see in the photos that I see, I look at photos online and in books and stuff, and there's, especially I think increasingly in recent years, a pull towards perfection and towards sort of a clinical, clean look, which is maybe since I see that, I'm pulled more and more towards the other direction. I mean, little imperfection is, or another word for that is like chance or like luck or serendipity. The things that are not comfortable and like clean. Those are things I try to look for in my pictures, but more often they sort of just pop up on their own, and it feels like almost like the photo gods are sort of injecting this little juice into them or something. I mean, sometimes since I shoot film, sometimes there's processing errors. The film isn't done quite right. There's little fixer marks, or in the darkroom, there might be like a little flare. Or sometimes I'll throw something on the print as I'm enlarging it to make like a little mark or something. Sort of just anything that makes you question what's happening and makes you question that connection to reality. I think is good in my book. And so, I think actually now, especially and increasingly over the last 10 or 15 years, I've been pulled more and more towards that style. And pictures, when I look on the contact sheet and I see something that's like too set up, like, looks like the classic street shot or whatever, I tend to not be so interested in that. And I want to have something wrong with the photo. Those are the ones that more and more sort of captivate me.
Okay.
You could say, I mean, if in musical terms, I might be more influenced towards Captain Beefheart, who I used to hate. That is like, I used to hate it. I mean, it was terrible music, and when I was like 25, I hated it, and now I love it. It's just so wrong in so many good ways. Or the Shags, or something like that. Music that is sort of you wouldn't hear it on like a pop station. It's like taking the fundamental formula and like twisting it.
And I wanted to ask you, because we talked about surrealism, we talked about photography, not really street photography, but your own definition of photography. Could you exactly tell me what is your definition of photography, the way you do it, in a few sentences? I know it's tough, but I want to get it from you.
Well, I mean, photography, technically it's drawing with light. So, I mean, in raw terms, that's what it is. And it's taking the elements of a visual scene, the world, and like translating them onto a 2D surface. And so I keep repeating the same thing, but it's if I can do that in a way that confuses or jumbles or sort of makes you question that translation, that's the type of photography that appeals to me most. And so, the black and
Okay.
white thing, the imperfections, the little quirks, anything that sort of twists that process of like what you see is not exactly what you get. What is photography? That it can be a lot of things. There's so many approaches, but that's sort of the approach that is most central to my vision.
And has your photography vision changed since the beginning, since you've started, and how has it changed?
I've been pulled more and more towards, well, away from sort of straight, easily read scenes and more towards mistakes, imperfections, chance, serendipity, all those little things that sort of confuse the process of the translation. So in the last, well, just gradually since from the time I started to now, I've been pulled more and more in that direction. And so, I'll see like when I look at my contact sheets now, there might be like a fixer, some processing stain or something that is confusing. And 20 years ago, I probably would just like skip that image. And now like that's the one. I'm gonna print that, or
That's
like
what I
print
wanted
if
from.
it's like two images side to side that sort of go together. I might not have even noticed that 20 years ago, and now I'll print that as like a split frame or just try and combine them. So I'm sort of opened up a little more to things that are things that aren't planned out as much, things that I just sort of encounter. Um, and
Okay. And what advice would you give to your younger self when you started out photography that maybe you now regretted of not doing? What would you say to your younger
I
me?
mean, the basic boring advice is organize better. When I began shooting, I was a little haphazard in how I labeled things and how I categorized them and put them into binders and boxes. And so I have about the first 10 years of my archive is really hard to dig into. It's not easily sorted. I basically have all these work prints and I have sort of random charts on my computer about where I might find them. And and then around 2007 or so, that's when I really started getting better about that stuff. I labeled stuff really well. I could put things in more clean places. And so now, for the last 20 years or so, I can sort of find stuff when I need to. But yeah, I would say if you're just starting out, if you're 20, you need to, whether you're shooting on a digital file archive or a film system or whatever, you need to really think about how you want to set up your archive and how you can to make things easily found. I mean, ideally, you can keyword everything and date everything and just make it easy to sort through. You're going to make it so much easier on yourself later. I mean, that's a
Later on.
purely like technical advice
And what about more on the artistic side?
for young
What
people.
would you, yeah, for yourself, what would you say to your younger self?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think I don't know if I would have any advice for my younger self that would change what I actually did. I mean, I basically did pretty much what I should have, I think, artistically. I basically was, mostly self taught and self learning. And so that is what worked best for me. And if I was going to talk to my 20-year-old self, I would say, like, do the exact same thing. Maybe, carry your camera every day, go out and look and make as many strong pictures as you can. And that's sort of what I did.
Yeah. Okay,
I
cool.
guess the one, there's a little bit of a fork in the road whether when I started getting more serious about photography, if I should go to like art school or go into a more of a professional direction. And that I would say might be a road that for a younger person that they might want to think about that decision. For some people, it'd probably be a better choice to go into like to get an MFA, to do it sort of by the book. But that wasn't really ever a path that appealed to me. I didn't. So yeah.
Exactly.
So my advice
Okay.
was probably just what I did.
That's perfect. That's still interesting, very much.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go a little bit into the nerdy stuff, in a way, in technicalities in that
Okay.
sense. And the first question would be, what was your first camera? and why did you start with that camera?
Okay, so for the first 5 or 6 years, I used SLRs. I think my very first camera was a Yashica, maybe a Yashica SLR. I've been through so
Okay.
many cameras.
Exactly.
Cameras either break or get lost, or I move on to something else. But I would say the very first one was that Yashica SLR, and then I was using the SLRs for maybe 10 years or so. I switched to
Okay.
rangefinders in about the mid 2000s when I started doing more like street photography, for lack of a better word. When I started shooting people and more, when I got into rangefinders, that sort of opened up the territory of like strangers and urban shooting. And so I go to like downtown Portland and look for people and sort of do that more. I didn't ever do that with an SLR. That was so I've been using rangefinder. I eventually got a Leica, and that became my main camera for a while. And basically had rangefinders for the last 20 years, just for that purpose. They're small, they're light, they're quick, they're unobtrusive. The standard reasons that most people use those. I've always had. So I've been through like all sorts of cameras, all sorts of SLRs and rangefinders, and I've always had like at least one of those as a sort of a main camera, a camera to sort of be my primary record reality camera. And then I've been
And
go
about
ahead.
that, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to jump on it. You just said you had so much different equipment throughout your life. Do you think the equipment changes the vision of a photographer, or that kind of stays the same
Well, I mean, just what I explained when
without help?
when I switched to rangefinders, it opened up the sort of the street photography territory. So that definitely
Okay.
changed. An SLR is much louder and more noticeable, and compared to a rangefinder, which allowed me to shoot more quiet moments. The first rangefinder I bought was a little Hexar, which is basically the quietest camera out there, I think. So I would shoot that on the bus and in bookstores and in situations where any other camera would have been noticed, but I could shoot that and be very unobtrusive. And so, in that, the equipment definitely changed that style. So I was about to say, so I've always had these primary cameras to shoot, whatever I encounter just in passing. And then I usually have a second camera as sort of like a play camera. And that's been a range of different cameras. So I have like my main camera, and then for a while I had a Noblex, a swing lens camera, which, it's, it basically takes scenes and makes super strange permutations. I would shoot that on like slow motion and make all these blurs and effects. Holgas, Dianas, Instax. I've had all those different cameras just as to sort of shake up my vision a little bit. So I have my main camera, and then I have this other camera to sort of, if I need to sort of jolt my brain a little. So I can't remember which other ones. I had like one of those Lomo swing cameras for a while. I had for the last maybe 5 to 8 years, my second camera has usually been a little point and shoot flash camera. Like I had an Olympus stylus for a while. I've had a few of those. And so if I get a little bored with like just shooting the straight scene, I'll pull out the little like pocket flash camera and just do like a little shake up, add a little light to the situation, or like throw some rocks in front of the scene, or like twist it, something to sort of like just get out of whatever I'm
A
seeing.
little.
So in that sense, the cameras sort of play into what I want to do with my vision. I need to, if something feels too static, if I'm just shooting, rangefinder, I need to get a little like juice in there, I'll bring out one of these other cameras. And unfortunately, all cameras break. I've been through a ton of them. They
I've
always
heard
break, or they get lost or bumped or whatever. And so, these secondary cameras, I might have one for like 2 years or 5 years or whatever, and then something happens to it, and then I use that opportunity to like try another camera, get some other format in there.
And try something new.
Yeah. So
You have to break a couple cameras.
To be a photographer.
Yeah, of
Actually,
course.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's true.
my
That's true.
cameras, I posted an old picture of one of my Leica online a long time ago, and it was just totally beat to hell. I mean, I had like, it goes with me everywhere. It's in my backpack, it's in my pocket, it's in my jacket. And so after a while, it became like sort of like an old rusty tank or something, just this like form. So, but that camera was tough. It held in there for a while, and then it eventually died.
Okay, cool. We've read that in 2019 you had, let's say, an encounter, a glitch encounter, and you took with your iPhone. There was something going on with your phone, and something creative sparked out of that uh, phone practice, if we want to say it like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and why did you went down that path for a bit of your creativity, and what was that you found interesting in a way?
Well, I mean, that was just what I was just talking about. It was an outgrowth of that. When I get a little tired of like this, just the static camera of straight scenes, I'll go to like my second camera, whatever it is, a Holga or Diana. And then in some cases, after I got like an iPhone, I started playing around with that as my second camera. And it has the little pano mode. You probably explored it yourself. And when you shoot the pano mode in like fluid situations, you get the camera can't quite figure out how to connect the scene, and so you get these like strange figures and blurs and shapes. And I mean, you can look at the photos that I took to sort of get a sense of that, or you can just do it on your own if you go out and shoot your iPhone pano. It's a little bit related. It's a little bit of an outgrowth of what I did with the Noblex, which I mentioned a little while ago, the swing lens camera. So I would shoot that on slow motion. If you shoot that on on the slowest shutter speed, it's a slit that moves across the plane, and it takes about 4 seconds to actually make an exposure. So I would take that out and shoot that and do like a 4 second exposure, and it takes well, maybe not 4 seconds, maybe 2 seconds, whatever. You push the button here, and by the time the camera finishes, all these people have moved around and done something else, and the picture became really like fluid. And so that when I started tinkering with the iPhone pano stuff, that's kind of what it was an outgrowth of that. I would do the same thing with the pano mode. You get your iPhone pano shot, and it takes a few seconds to make one of those too. And in fluid situations, people are just combining, get like limbs cut off and faces and just strange effects. I would take a picture and not really have any sense of like how it would turn out, which is kind of exciting for me in the way.
It
I mean,
is
I know photographer is supposed to like
definitely unconventional, no?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it just was curiosity, right? It's like what's going to happen if I try this? I'll push the button and who knows? And you sort of have some control. I mean, you control where you are and when you push the shutter, but beyond that, not too much. If you're like creating things, you're supposed to be in control and decisive and make choices. And I sort of like gave all that stuff up. It's like I'm just going to like let fate take over here, which is to me kind of fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit, sorry, just for a second to the analog. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about how do you handle technical challenges such as light, composition, crowds when using analog? If you can share a little bit about your process. How do you handle technical challenges when you're out shooting analog?
I mean, there's
How
not a
does
lot
that
of
work for you?
not a lot of challenges. Like I carry a bunch of film with me. I have a camera that cameras are pretty simple. You just put the film in and push the shutter, and the only time where you have to do too much is when you're changing film. So not sure if there's too many challenges. It's almost like simpler than using a digital thing because
I mean, when you use digital, you have the screen, you can a little bit think a little bit beforehand. That's just your eye, like condition. You cannot really, you have just one shot. It's not like digital shooting continuously, ta, 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 and then
right.
one photo will come out good.
I
It's a
mean,
little
I've just been
different with
shooting that way
analog.
so long that I don't even think about any other option. I shoot a
That's
photograph.
fair.
It might take a second to like advance the film, and I mean, I think some people might see that as limitations, and I kind of see that as welcome boundaries. Like so, if I don't really shoot much digital, but when I have, there's just too many choices for me. You can decide on the color balance and the ISO and the filter, and there's all these modes and all that stuff. Or if you shoot with like a zoom lens, you have to decide on the focal length and all too many choices for me get in the way of what I want to do. I just want to limit my choices. I want to basically I choose the aperture, I let the camera choose the shutter speed, and then everything else I sort of have built in already. I always shoot the same speed film, I shoot the same focal length, I shoot pretty much the same style of camera. I mean, I've been through a few camera bodies, but I don't want to think about that stuff. I just want to think about what's in front of me, and like just focus on the scene and like clear my head of all the choices. And so that, at least for me, it helps me to just simplify. I can't remember the quote, but I've heard people say that limitations are actually constructive for art. I mean, most artists sort of react positively when the more they're hemmed in, they sort of like fight against restrictions a little more. So I guess I would say that applies to my photography. If I feel like a little bit hemmed in with like less options, then I sort of want to like push against them a little more. And so I can do that just by my technical choices.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
Suits you for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. And I would like to move a little bit into your method and process. So still staying on the nerdy stuff that we all like, but more about your method. And one thing I was curious about was, what's your editing process given your full analog photographer process?
I basically use the darkroom to edit. I mean,
Yeah.
I do use the same process that I did when I first began photography. Was shoot film, make contact sheets, make prints in the darkroom. So that's basically the basic structure of it. And so I'll shoot the film, process it, make contact sheets, and I get that part done fairly quickly. And then the editing comes much later. I'm a few years behind my negatives, and so when I go in the darkroom, I think I might have sent you guys a video about this.
Yeah,
but
we love that.
Okay, so it's the standard thing. You go through the contact sheet, dun 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 dun. You pick out the frame that you like, and then go print it up. And so that's the actual time when I make my choices about like which pictures I like. And so that's like basically the first cut. That's like this picture is either yes or no. And then so I make prints of that, get a box of those, and then eventually like say someone says like send me a bunch of pictures, make some edit there, and so that's like a later edit where I have all these boxes and boxes and boxes, and I have to sort of like sift them down and figure out which pictures go with which project. Which, if I have a show or something, I have to like edit that down to like 20.
Yeah.
But like the basic initial layer is just that process of like negative to work print, and then that's sort of the initial. So that's like most people would have this on a computer by basically having an analog form, like all these work prints. That's sort of the basic layer of editing. And then I can edit down further from that. But it's a little bit of it's not exactly well designed. It's sort of always a little bit of a crapshoot. Like which pictures are gonna which pictures are gonna make this call, and then sometimes it's a different edit.
Wanted to follow up actually on this, because when you have two very equally interesting shots, how do you decide which one makes the cut?
Sometimes it's hard. That's that can present a dilemma. I mean, I would say it's kind of fun to sort of encounter that choice, but a lot of times it's really nerve-wracking. It's like, which one is it? I sort of have this impulse to just choose one. I mean, if there's like, say there's like 4 that are sort of similar on the contact sheet, and maybe some people might print all 4 and then sort of leave themselves a little more room to think about that later. But I kind of have this impulse. I just got to choose one. I think that the choice often comes down to the thing I was talking about earlier, the imperfection. I will usually go with the wrong image. So like the picture that is sort of like too perfect is the one that I'll probably like leave aside. And then if it has like a little bit of a problem with it, that's the one that I usually print, that I want to take a look at and think about a little longer. So 20 years ago, that might have been a different answer. But
no, that's actually very interesting, because this leads me to the following question, which is, what's your personal definition of a successful shot?
I mean, in photography, you sort of get images thrown at you that you can't change, right? You take the picture, and then later you look at what happened, and it's sort of like done, unless you want to Photoshop it or whatever. But so the successful ones are the ones where I do that process, and then I don't feel like I need to change anything else. Like I feel like I got the shot, and if I had a choice, I wouldn't even if I had the choice, if I was a painter or something, I wouldn't go in and change anything. And so almost never happens. I mean, almost every picture you take, or at least for me, I look at the picture and like, oh, I wish this was over here. I wish it was cropped a little differently. I wish it was angled. And there's always a little something that I sort of nags me about almost every picture that I want to change. And so I think that by definition, the successful ones are the ones where I look at and I'm like, all right, that's good. I don't want to change anything. And so and a lot of times that is just sort of comes about almost not randomly, but it's sort of like is the universe just throws certain images at you like that, and you just got to take them, like accept what you got.
Okay, fair.
Take the win.
Absolutely. Changing the subject a little bit, we want to tell you that we had a little bit of an encounter. We had an interview with Jack Simon, who told us about one situation he has gotten into. So he was out shooting, and while taking photographs, he ended up taking a photograph of something that he shouldn't have. So he ended up deleting it. It was like a humorous encounter as he described it. And this made me think about something that I want to ask you, which is, have you ever found yourself in strange situations while you were out shooting? So what's the craziest thing that ever happened while you were out shooting?
Like strange situation? I mean,
yeah.
If you're out in the world taking pictures, it's inevitable that someone's going to wonder what you're doing, or someone's going to ask you questions, or especially if you're shooting people, you're going to get either negative or questioning or adverse reactions sometimes. And so obviously I've had some of those. They don't happen like all the time or very often, but as far as like strange situations, I have to think about that a little bit. I don't know if I've ever had anything that was truly weird. I've had, people get sort of pretty angry at me, and sort of, I shoot film, so I can't delete the image, but people want me to do that, or they want to know what I'm doing or why I'm taking pictures. And so, I'm pretty good at.
How do you react to that? How did you react to that? Because you cannot delete it, of course. So what did you say?
I mean, you can probably tell I'm a pretty mellow person. I like to like diffuse situations. I don't like to escalate or get into arguments. And so I've been through this enough that I know I can basically talk through things, and then I just try and like extricate myself and go away as soon as possible.
Okay, perfect.
Some people like to sit there and talk about like the ethics or the laws or their rights to do certain things, and that's just not really worth it to me, I don't think. I mean, actually, the most interesting thing is like someone will ask you like, "Why are you taking this picture? Why are you taking my picture? Why did you take that?" And like, I really don't know. I mean, I sort of ask myself that question all the time too. Like, why am I taking pictures? That's a very good question. Like, what is the ultimate goal of all this? And so maybe if someone like asks me that question, it forces me to ask myself, and it might be a good thing to ask myself that once in a while. And I don't have a good answer. Like I can say like, I'm taking this because this scene looks interesting, or I'm out making artistic pictures or whatever. But even there, that doesn't really answer the question, like why I do that stuff. I don't know. It's like, why does a spider spin a web? I mean, I've encountered some hostile situations, but nothing. I've never been in like, I've never had one of those situations escalate to the point of like physical danger or anything like that.
Okay, good. Because we've encountered photographers that actually escalate, like the situation escalated to physical.
Well, yeah, I was just
violence like that, which is not really fair in any case.
Yeah.
I was just with Dirty Harry the last few days, and he got beat up. He was shooting in New York, and he was like shooting. I can't remember where he was shooting, but like 5 guys assaulted him, and he had to like lay on the ground and defend himself. So sometimes, who knows what can happen.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit on, let's say, a tough topic in a way for you, if we can say that, street versus documentary photography a little bit. Okay. If you're comfortable with that, because you've explored many photographic styles, you've reviewed also quite a lot of books and photographic projects as well, and we want to focus a little bit on 2 distinctive genres, which are street and documentary photography. And we wanted to ask you, how much do you think, if you think, this genre overlap, and where would you draw the line between the two?
There's definitely some overlap. I mean, they pull, you're sort of doing the same thing with both disciplines where you're going out in the world and extracting information. I mean, I think I may have addressed this a little earlier, but there's the difference for me is that if I was a documentary photographer, if I was like working for a newspaper or like an expose or something, I would want my pictures to be more about the subject matter, more about like what the actual thing in the picture is, and so the picture would have to describe some thing or event or something about the world. And so when I think about street photography, or at least as I do it, it's kind of the opposite of that. I want to take the picture, extract the information, and then leave all that behind. I just want the photograph, right? I want the picture to be just the picture, and then whatever was in the scene, that's not really my concern. So that's sort of the division, right? The documentary person, it's all about what's in the scene, and the street person is about the picture. It's just about the art form.
Okay. So do you think there is a difference between telling a story and documenting a moment?
Yeah, I mean, like the best street photography is the best images hopefully tell the wrong story. I mean, so when
Unless you're a documentary
if you're if you're at a sporting event and you're a documentary photographer, you show like a picture of the winning shot or whatever, and it's like documenting what actually happened. And if you're a street photographer, you take that same event and you twist it into some completely different narrative. And so it might be the same situation, but the best images can kind of take this information and confuse it in some way or make it ambiguous. They say photographs don't lie, photographers lie. I mean, I think I love pictures where you look at the scene and you're either questioning like what was happening, or what was happening, but that the picture is telling some other story about what was happening. So it's two sort of different motivations, I think. And, both are valid. I like to look at all sorts of photographs. So I look at documentary, I look at street, I look at whatever. But the ones that appeal to me most are the ones where it's not about describing the world. It's about what's the picture look like, what's happening in the picture.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you just a last question on this topic. Since you are also a writer and you don't like definition as photographer, you don't like labels like that. I wanted to ask you, how much importance do you give to a post-shooting narration or a caption after you have taken a picture? Because in documentary photography, usually the description, the narration of a specific shot is something that helps the photograph get through. In photography, maybe street photography, in that sense of photography, different genre of photography, that's not really something that is important. Sometimes it takes off from the photograph. What's your take on that?
I mean, I probably am repeating myself, but I like to look at the picture just without any information. So I want to just look at I'm mostly concerned with the photograph. So usually when I look at pictures in books or any other place, I don't read any text or captions or anything until I like absorb the photographs first. So I just want to like see what develops visually for me. And then, if I'm designing a book or reading a book, my preference would be for the captions to be somewhere else, away from the photographs, or for the text to be somewhere else. So, they sort of relate to each other, but they also contaminate each other, I think. And especially text, I think, can really affect how you receive photographs. And so at least initially, I like to look at photographs just as pictures. I can't remember what the question was. Is that the question?
Yeah, no. Okay. It answered my question for sure. Yeah, I wanted to know how much importance do you give to post-production narration, post-shooting narration, in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff. So yeah, I like I'm a photographer. I like to look at pictures, and I want to, so I'm drawn to the photographs first. And then all the other text and supporting information is also helpful too. So usually I look at that, and it sort of fills in some of the backstory. Books that are like completely pictures with like no text, those are a little bit challenging for me sometimes. I sort of want a little bit of background info at the end just to sort of fill it out.
To complete the visuals.
Yeah, I think it takes a little bit of both.
Yeah. For sure. That answered my question. So
absolutely. I would like to touch up on writing a little bit more, if that's okay with you. And I wanted to ask, you are also very well known for your blog. And why did you start writing about photography?
Why did I start?
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't just start with photography. I mean, I've always been a writer in the sense that I've kept journals and written for myself. And so I've done that since the time I was a kid. So I have like stacks of writings and thoughts and comments that aren't, before I started the blog, they weren't necessarily photo related. But as I got more and more into photography, that sort of became more of a central focus. And I think the blog began right after I moved to Eugene. So that was in 2007. And so I had just moved here, and I was, one reason, one thing that sparked that is that, it was in the age of blogs. Everyone was like starting blogs, and it was a very active time for that stuff. But it was also a transitional point for me. So I had just moved to a new place, and I was looking around for a community, and so I found this sort of online blog writing community, and I sort of tapped into that at that moment. It filled a little bit of a niche in my life, and so I think it was 2007. I just started writing, or at least writing online. I mean, I had been writing before, but posting online, and then it sort of like got a little bit of a life of its own. The more I did it, the more I sort of kept doing it, and it sort of became almost a habit. Like I felt like have I posted something today, and it's sort of almost like an obligation. And so it just sucked me along, kind of like photography. I just did it, and then it gained a sort of a motivation on its own.
Yeah.
And then it's like,
and how? Sorry, go on.
In the last, I would say it also had so it started with naturally, and that sort of had a natural lifespan too. So it's at this point, it's a little bit dormant. I mean, I only post like once in a while, and I don't. Most of what I post is just interviews. I don't actually do much blog writing anymore. Most of my, photo writing I put on Instagram now, so it's a much more shorter content, and it's much more sane. I mean, when I was doing the blog, I would spend hours writing posts, and it took a lot of time and effort, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm much happier to set that aside.
Yeah, I mean, it's something also pretty, if we can say, atypical for a photographer to also have a good pen. And you do. So that's something you should be proud of, if I can say that.
It's atypical?
Yeah.
Atypical, not really common.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. For a photographer, usually they just speak with their eyes in a way, but like I really enjoy personally the writing part. So that's something I just wanted to share.
Thanks. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, I was wondering, what does writing give you that photography does not?
Well, I mean, just in terms of logistics, it's something that I can do. It's much more convenient for me. I can do it at home, or I can do it in a coffee shop, or where it doesn't require, to take a picture. You basically have to be in the world and like go someplace, see something, be out doing something. So just in terms of pure logistics, writing can happen anywhere, as opposed to photography, which is like it has stricter requirements. I mean, I think it's two different things, right? For me, photography is about seeing. I mean, it's all about looking at things, observation. It's a much more of a visual process, and writing is sort of the opposite of that. For me, it's more of a mental game. It's like I might start with like a little thought and then see how it develops, and it sort of shows me what I'm thinking, and sort of tells me something about my mental process. Photography doesn't have anything to do with that stuff. Photography is about looking. It's about letting my eyes function and letting my eyes sort of play games, and it's like two different parts of my brain, sort of.
Yeah, speaking of seeing eye to eye in a way, you have interviewed so many photographers. You have been part and are currently part of so many collectives. So I would say that you had so many exchanges with other photographers. And what were your top 3 takeaways that you've learned from other photographers?
That's a hard question. Top 3 exchanges? I mean, I think just interacting with other people, I don't know if this is like a top 3, but just every time you have a conversation or an interaction with other people, I mean, even right here, interacting with you, you sort of pick up just the energy of another person and like how they, what their situation is, and how that might relate to you, and how it sort of, each time you have that interaction, it sort of expands your sense of like humanity, and sort of like, it's like there's like so many different ways of being and people and ideas, and sort of just anytime you can have that interaction, it broadens your world a little bit. And so, like, I've done all these interviews and meeting people and everything, and sort of, I think that's what I get out of it mostly, is it just to sort of get a sense of like other possibilities, and like who all these other worldviews and people, and just you have like 8 billion worldviews out there, and so many different possibilities. And I think a lot of the problems in the world come from restrictions on that possibility. A person that might have not, the more you sort of confine yourself and limit yourself to a narrow range of worldviews and narrow range of people and narrow range of opinion, that's going to lead the world to problems, which I don't need to go into politics here, but the world has, I think most of the world's problems are generated by that other tendency. And so, just personally, it's about me broadening my scope, but then you can sort of generalize and say that's a good direction to go in general. So, I mean, here we are we're on two sides of the world. You're in Italy and here I am in Oregon, and we're having a sort of worlds combined. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, thank you for your amazing answer. That's a very sweet note to end this section on, so we can go to the next and switch the moods.
Exactly.
Okay.
I want to go a little bit. We've talked about, you mentioned this a little bit beforehand, but I want to go a little bit more into details about it. And I wanted to ask you, where do you draw the line between observation and privacy? I know we talked about it a little bit before, but I want to have insight from you because, we're from Europe. Talking about privacy by us, laws are much more restricted, whereas in the US, it's a little bit more open in a way to photograph in public spaces, but not so much, as you were mentioning before, the little encounter that Dirty Harry had, and also other photographer too. Where do you draw the line between observation and privacy?
Photography does have like a voyeuristic edge to it, or it can. I mean, so it anytime you're out shooting someone else, you're sort of wondering like where that line is. And for me, I'm a private person myself, and I have uncomfortable spying on people, or sometimes I'm uncomfortable photographing them. I'm uncomfortable watching people for very long. And so I sort of sense that boundary. And so for me, that boundary is sometimes gets in the way of me taking pictures. I mean, it's much more of a boundary for me than for many street photographers. I think some people don't have any boundary, and they'll just go into someone's private space. They might like sit down next to someone at a bus stop and start a conversation or whatever. So there's like a much more of a public fluidity. And for me, I sense that wall a lot more. And so you might see that in my pictures. They're much more, compared to a lot of street photos, they're a little bit more distant and clinical and sort of observational. I try and keep that distance a little more in myself and also in my photographs. So yeah, just personally, that boundary is presents a little bit of a dilemma for me, because it's in my head, and sometimes it blocks up my photographs. And I try, when I'm really in a zone, if I'm shooting all day and I'm feeling like really good about what I'm doing, then I can sort of be a little more casual about it and go get in people's spaces a little more easily. You mentioned the European laws and the American laws and all that. I mean, I know people talk about like, the ethics of photography, and there's all these concerns about photographing, especially with like kids or people that don't want to be photographed, and putting their photographs online and things. And I'm not so hung up on that stuff. I think if you're in the world, if you're in public, you can reasonably expect your photograph to be taken, and you can reasonably expect yourself to wind up on some website or something. I think we live in a world now where all that stuff is kind of open game, and putting limits or trying to like cleanse that stuff is kind of an uphill battle. It doesn't, those concerns are less, I don't really think about that stuff when I'm photographing.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there are a lot of photographers that don't really think that when they're out shooting, but it's definitely a topic of debate. Also people flashing at other people's in the streets is not always something necessarily ethical for everybody, or portraying certain subjects in different manners that don't really make justice to them. I think it's a big debate, and interesting what you said.
I think it's
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the flat, some people are pretty aggressive about how they photograph. They might use a flash or get right up on people. So I don't really do that technique. And so it's less of an issue for me. As far as like people that do that, what the ethics are, I mean, I don't think doing that to someone is really going to like alter their life in any major way. I mean, it's just, it's a half a second. They move on with their day. I don't really, to me, it's not a major concern. I know that's me as a photographer. It's probably going to, most people that are non-photographers might see it differently, but maybe I'm just trying to justify what I do. But
yeah, no, that's fair. That's an interesting take for sure. I want to just wrap this section up and with one last question before we move into the book and a little bit more fun stuff as well. And I wanted to ask you, is there anything in today's photography scene that you think or feel it's overrated, it's exaggerated, it's hypocritical? And what would you say about that? There must be something that you don't really feel, this is something that matters to photography in a way. I'm just wondering what's your take on that?
That's a hard one to come up with right away. I mean, I'm open to, I don't have like too many critiques about like different approaches, because I think whatever works for some people is valid. Like if you want to do it a certain way or have a certain technique or a certain approach, that's you, and that there's enough space in the world for everyone to sort of find that on their own. And so it's hard for me to say like that person's doing it wrong. That's not the right way to do it, because like maybe it is for someone else. And so it's hard for me to be judgmental in that way. I'm pretty open. I'm pretty open to anything. I mean, I know how I do it. I know how I do it, but I am a little bit less willing to point the finger and say like that's not the right way. So
that's fair. I wanted to hear your take. So that's your take, and that's sufficient for me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so we can get into the book a little bit. We have Asa Nishimasa. And to you, what's the common thread running through the book?
The selection that I sent you, I would say the common thread, some of the things we've been talking about, which is sort of playful games, abstraction, surrealism, irony. I don't like to shoot sort of straight scenes or straight moments. I think a lot of what the book is going to be organized around, hopefully, is sort of my view of the world as a little bit of an offbeat place, and maybe with a little bit of humor and absurdity. And so Asa Nishimasa sort of plays into that. It's a nonsense word, so it's sort of it's basically taking the world and like instantly turning it into something that's a little bit imperfect or off. And so hopefully the book will be like that. You can look at the pictures and it won't be like, this is like straight reality. It'd be more like this is the world through his eyes, which is a little bit off kilter and hopefully distinctive in some way.
Okay, definitely. Thank you. And before we get into the actual photo analysis, because Marco will show you the photo selection, I have one last question, like a very, very personal question, because I am kind of a cinephile, so I have to ask. Since Asa Nishimasa is the famous riddle from Otto and Mezzo by Fellini, has the film shaped your vision, or has black and white cinema in general shaped your artistic vision?
That film, I mean, it shaped my vision in the sense that it's so weird and absurd and playful, and so I love all that stuff. I'm not a cinemaphile, and so it's not like I've watched that movie 50 times or whatever. I saw it maybe 10 years ago, and I liked the movie, and also that phrase just sort of stuck with me, and so I like jotted it down. I mean, I tend to like movies that have that same trait, that are kind of like my photography, I guess, a little bit surreal, a little bit off, a little bit not just a straight on, Academy Award winner or whatever, but movies that are a little bit offbeat. I love the early Coen Brothers movies. I mean, now I'm gonna have to go down to cinema,
Cinema past.
I don't know if I've even seen any Fellini movies except for that one. I think for whatever reason, we saw that movie and it just sort of stuck with me. And so, especially that phrase too. And I like the fact that you can Google it. Like, I tried Googling it after I saw the movie, and it basically, I thought it was like gonna translate into some language or something, but you can't translate it into anything. It's basically like, even now, where like every phrase has some backstory. Like that is still pure nonsense. You look it up on Google, and it's like, it has no translation, which is kind of amazing.
Truly.
Yeah. Thank you for answering my very cinephile question. So I think
we can move on to the photo analysis, as Marilu was mentioning. And the idea behind this photo analysis for you to talk with us a little bit about your photography, your vision. What did you see in this collection of photographs? Any anecdotes you had or anything like that? So this one would be the first one.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I don't know how this comes across to you if you haven't been to this place, but it looks like a scene from San Francisco, which is how most people interpret this, because this background scene in the Golden Gate Bridge, you can see in the background, and it's hilly. But this is actually a studio backdrop in Disneyland. It looks like a real scene, but it's not. This streetscape in front are some tourists at Disneyland. And then the background, that's all a studio backdrop that's been like a fake scene that's drawn on a big wall, basically. And so, this is me sort of playing with different shapes, constructing what looks like a city, but it's actually something completely different. And these are just people that are randomly walking through. It doesn't really have anything to do with those people, but they're just sort of figures that's aligned nicely in the frame. So, I like that confusion of like not being able to place it. It looks like it might be one thing. It's actually a completely different place. And it's just me being sort of absurdist. And if you look closely, I mean, if you actually are from San Francisco, or if you know that scene well, you know that can't actually be real, because there's no vantage where you could see the Golden Gate Bridge like that over a hill. It's just made up, basically. I think this building, the building on the right is actually real. That's a real building. But the backdrop from the middle to the left scene, that's all a mural that's drawn on a wall.
That's crazy. Ooh. Wow. Interesting.
Amazing.
Next one.
Well, I'm glad it was confusing. If it's confusing, that's good.
It works.
See, if I should. So that's a good example of like, if you see that picture and then I caption it below it, it's going to just alter how you might see the scene. So I want people to look at that with no information, and then they can look later and realize, oh, that's from Florida. That's a different place.
That's exactly the point of the question. I love that. Yes.
This one. This is during a Veterans Day parade. I go to this parade every year near me, which is the largest veterans parade on the West Coast. And so I shot this one year at the parade. This is soldiers reflected in a house window, and so they're behind me, and the street behind me, walking in, about to get to the parade. They're not actually in the parade yet, but they're in formation, setting up. And then this window was like a blank reflection. I don't know what the story was, but it had it was like a silver mirror. I mean, I think it's a window, but it had like a mirror-like quality. And so I basically combine the things, put the soldiers into the house. And so it has, there's some abstraction there. You can't tell exactly what's happening. So that naturally appeals to me. That was why I took the photograph. And it's a place that, I mean, I have like hundreds of pictures from this parade. I've been going for like 15 years or something. And I always shoot all day, and it's real fun. So this is sort of goes to put this in I have a big pile of these that I may do something with at some point, but it's a single image, but I also have like sort of a project on that too.
Interesting. This one really stands out. Like,
Absolutely.
honestly, it feels very surreal, like they're entering the house. I don't know. Beautiful. Next one.
So, this one is actually in San Francisco, as opposed to being fake San Francisco. I was actually hanging out with a few photographers when I shot this. I was hanging out with Stephen McLaren and Jack Simon. Jack Simon,
yeah.
who you're doing his book, I think.
Yeah.
We were all wandering around and we found this scene, this painter, and I sort of twisted it to make it like we were talking about before, like a documentary photographer would shoot this scene to project what's actually happening. And so me as a street photographer, I'm shooting the scene to tell a completely different story. I want to come over here and make it look like this guy is painting the wrong person. And so just from perspective and place and how I shot it, I'm taking what the actual reality is and like making it into my own thing.
Yeah.
And I think you should ask Jack. I think he shot this exact same person.
Yeah.
So
We've talked about this picture in the same way. Yeah.
He has a color version, and it's slightly different, but it's from the same place.
I just wanted to ask you, just because I see this picture, I just wanted to ask you, which is something a little bit more articulated in a way, but have you ever took a photograph and then delete it because of ethical reasons as well? Because it's something, when we saw this picture, when I first saw this picture, also Jack's picture as well, like it kind of looked incredible for, to just have a painter there, have an homeless guy there. Have you ever took a photograph and then later on disregarded because it was, ethically speaking, was a little bit too much?
I mean, this picture, the fact
Not
that
necessarily this,
well,
but yeah.
Let me just start with this picture. I don't usually, I have no rules really, but I try and not shoot homeless people just as a sort of in general because there's weird power dynamics and there are some ethical concerns that, so I guess my general inclination would be to stay away from that stuff. I mean, this picture, I shot the homeless guy. I felt if I want to justify it a little bit, I think it's not really about, it's not like it's not making fun of him or like sort of making him vulnerable. It's more about me just using him as a prop in my photograph. And so maybe that's ethically dubious, but for me, it feels a little safer. I'm not gonna, if this guy's just laying in a gutter and he's all by himself and like sprawled out, I'm probably not gonna take his picture because like, what's the point of that? So like I said, try not to make any rules about that stuff, but in general, I would probably steer away from situations where you're taking advantage of people or trying to portray them in a way that makes fun of them or sort of makes some sort of pokes a hole in their world. Then again, we're out in public and we use people as subjects in our pictures, and that's just the nature of the game. So
yeah, that's fair. The next one would be this one.
Yeah, that's funny. I think this was in Portland when I was at a hotel up there. And yeah, the funny thing about this image, it's kind of, and I noticed you guys picked it for the cover, which is like, thanks for doing that. It's
Marco chose it.
one that I think up until like a week before I sent it to you, I hadn't even really thought about it, or even it wasn't even in my collection of like so-called winners. I mean, I have this box of like pictures that is always sifting through that are pictures that are like sort of my strongest. And this one, it barely made the cut. And I think it was just in some other box for a long time. And that I started sorting through and it caught my eye. And then it got into the A box. And it's sort of grown on me since then. I tend to like it. I mean, it's a little bit of like a one-liner. I mean, it's a quick hit, but it has staying power. I think just because it's so simple and it's kind of elegant in a way. It's a scene that this could be anywhere. You might see this scene like 50 times a day, but to actually like have it happen just like this and to take a picture of it, that's a little more rare. So like the picture where sort of a reminder, like this stuff is out there all the time. You just have to sort of pay attention, and there it is.
True. Very, very true. Nice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We have, I think that's it. So that's enough
Okay.
for the photo analysis.
Cool.
So Blake, thank you again for being with us. We hope you had fun as much as we did.
Absolutely.
And we hope we
Yeah, it was
made
great.
you feel comfortable as well, open to answer questions freely.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. Yeah, thanks for all the fun questions. I'm not, a natural speaker. I'm much more comfortable writing than speaking. So whatever I said that you can use to make me sound smart, go ahead and
You did amazing. You did amazing, Blake. No worries. Absolutely.
All right.
We had a blast.
Thank you.
And another little message to our viewers. Thank you for being with us and sitting with us throughout this very, very interesting interview. And again, I would like to remind you to subscribe, like, and comment, because what's just one small click to you means the world for us. Thank you, and see you next episode.